Thank you very much, Andre, for coming on the podcast.
Welcome and thank you for inviting me. So,
Awesome. So, why don't we start with a brief introduction? I guess, who are you and what has led up to where you are today working at Advisense in Norway?
absolutely. Yeah, I'm Cape Verdean. I was born in 10 islands in the west coast of Africa. And the history there is that we are an ex-colony from Portugal. So Portuguese speaking, that's the official language. And what that means is that usually we tend to go to college in a Portuguese speaking country, which makes it easier for us. But yeah, I went to Portugal. I started computer science because I really love programming. So I thought I wanted to be like a software developer. But then I realized that there was a lot of writing code that, I mean, the part I loved mostly about programming was algorithms and like really complicated stuff. And whenever I was discussing that with actual developers, they would be like, "Oh no, it's a lot more boring than that." So kind of like was let down by that. But not to say it cannot be very interesting, but the witnessing I was getting was contrary to that. But yeah, so then I started also doing some courses, of course, in college, and one of them was networking. And I absolutely fell in love with networking to the point I thought at some point I wanted to be a network architect. So yeah, I started doing all the Cisco certifications, CCNA security. I started CCNP. There were three exams I want to say at the time. I did one or two, I don't remember. But yeah, I basically started down that route. But in the meantime, I was actually learning a lot about cryptography and all those algorithms, how, I don't know, IPsec works, VPNs, all that stuff, firewalls, and all that. And then I started a course in college on cryptography. And because I always loved math, it kind of like clicked. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing because I was actually understanding how encryption works. And it made sense after some time. But in order to do actual cryptography, you kind of have like to have a PhD in math. And I was not going back to college to repeat, that's for sure. But without realizing what I was actually preparing myself really well to do pentest. Just really good basics in terms of not just basics, but like understanding really programming and networking. And I always love like low level stuff, operating systems, processes, threads, all that stuff. Was very, very, very familiar with Linux command line. At that point, I already had played a lot with Linux and installed mine from scratch, compiled the kernel, all that stuff, which is a once in a lifetime stuff. Like, we'll probably never do it again. I mean, it's like setting up, like building your own computer. You kind of have to do it once in a life, but then it's like, nah, thank you. I'm going to buy one. But yeah, without realizing, I was basically just building myself up to be the pen tester. And so I started looking for practical applications of the stuff that I knew. And I realized that, ethical hacking is a thing, apparently. It was super hard to find work in that area back in the day in Portugal. It was 2011 when I started working. At that time, there wasn't a market for pen testing. So I actually started working, but it was I was one of the first people, or the first to be hired. The company called Integrity, and they were a startup, and the company grew a lot since then. But in the beginning, it was pretty much a lot of consulting, like more defensive kind of work, because I was very familiar with open source tools and yeah, just Linux and all that security, like at a low level, and networking as well. I could read into the configuration of a Cisco device and understand like, oh yeah, you have a problem here, you have a problem there, blah blah. Um, So there was a lot of that in the beginning, and very little pen testing, but it started growing, growing, growing. And at some point, I was basically given the option to move onto the pen test team and do that full time. And I absolutely loved it because, yeah, I nothing against the defensive part of the job in security, but it tends to be a bit more bureaucratic. It's not like you can jump into like a bank and analyze like the configuration of a Cisco device and go like, no, let's change this. They're going to be no, 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 no. Like you need a proper plan. It's a project management at that point. Like you're setting up justification. Why do you need that? What's the advantage, disadvantage? What are the time allocations? How much do you need to do that? If you need any money, blah, blah. By the time you get authorization, it's like easily months, weeks, months. Uh, and that's just not something I deal well with. I don't like that at all. And in hacking is like, I set up we set up like our own red team infrastructure. You kind of like depend more on yourself. You just set up the whole thing and get ready to do the job. So when I'm dependent on myself, I'm a lot faster than all the management bureaucracy stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much how I started. Then I got married and in Portugal still. And in 2017, we moved to Melbourne, Australia. And yeah, I was recruited to a company there. Absolutely loved that experience. Spent almost 5 years there. But after COVID and having a daughter, and you start to feel the distance to family on the other side of the world because it's not even a money issue. It's like just for you to come back to the side of the world once a year, that's a long trip, especially with a baby. Not only that, but just the jet lag and all that, you have to stay at least 3 weeks. And the more the kid starts getting into stuff like school, you can work remote, even though it's kind of weird because it's like different, very different. I think it's like 10, 11 hours time difference, depending on where you are exactly. But yeah, the your kid can't be out of school for that long. So yeah, we decided to just move back to this side of the world, and yeah, Norway seemed like a really great place to raise a little girl. And yeah, we've been loving it ever since. Bought our home already, and yeah, just that's how I kind of ended up here. So now you have to put up with me. So
I think the Norwegian cybersecurity community is very happy to have you. It was a very
thanks.
interesting journey you've been on. It's you must have
Yes, sir.
experienced a lot and different ways of doing things and yeah, management.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
So now you're leading a team at Advisense, is that right?
exactly. So yeah, we basically do, yeah, I was given this opportunity and, yeah, I just, been loving it ever since, moved here to Advisense in November 2023. So a year and change. But yeah, we do pretty much, well, ethical hackers. I do pen tests, internal, external, web app, OT, red teams, purple teams. And then there's also the research components that you kind of have to not force it onto people, but kind of fight for it. Because as I'm sure you are aware, like in the consulting world, there's a lot of like billable work is usually the rule. And but that's something that I've always been against, which is in the consulting world, not only here, but in all over the world. There's like this notion of an expert. And what it feels like is that it's like this little package that is finalized, like an end product, and it's just an expert. And you can put it on the freezer and take it out like a year from now, and it will still be an expert. And like being a student myself, like trying to learn everyday type of stuff, you kind of understand that no, it doesn't really work that way. Like you can learn something today and consider yourself an expert, but if you don't touch that thing like for a year or two, or even worse, 3, like you will not know that thing very well. You can pick up probably a lot quicker, but it's not like you will know that thing, all the aspects of it. So I struggle a lot with the concept of an expert. And in order to actually have those, what you actually have to invest in is in having really solid period, constant time, consistent time in developing yourself. You have to study, you have to develop some sort of side project that you can learn and build on, and that's where the you maintain form in terms of expertise, and that is something that is sometimes struggle to get the time, and you kind of have to fight for it. But I really believe in that. So yeah, that's also part of the job, and trying to make it as fun as possible for the team. We have these really fun stuff that events that we do monthly, um, which is based on previous experience. I think I learned that back in Portugal, where we did it as well. I call it Hacker Pizza. It had different names throughout different companies, but as you can tell, it's basically ordering a bunch of pizzas and do like a technical presentation where people will learn. It's like a safe environment as well, where the more junior pen testers will be able to practice to do presentations, so that when they're actually like doing it in front of an audience, they won't get as freaked out. But yeah, just building up that whole thing, it's like an incredibly fun part of the job. So yeah, it's been super cool.
That sounds like a very important component of building like a proper culture, because I think that's the thing that many companies and organizations struggle to do, is actually to build uh, tight teams, so to speak, teams with a good culture, building and keeping strong technical talent over time. So
Yes.
yeah, that's probably a very important factor. Do you have some other factors that you keep in mind in order to maintain your team, so to speak, the competency, and also attracting new talent as well?
Yeah. Uh, I, I think it's a matter of like, in order to build like really good technical teams, it's a matter of you understanding like each individual's passions, and then also understand what you need to provide in terms of service, the qualities that you need, the technical know-how that you need, and then it's basically an you, even if you cannot align those two, there is still value to it, to the passions of specific individuals, because you can still, uh, let's say, for example, like the I'm back into doing some work with hypervisors, hypervisor development for security, blah blah, and more EDR related stuff. But that might be one of my presentations this year, so we'll see that later. But the point is, like studying, going deep into hypervisor technology, like from Intel, VTX, and all that stuff. Does it actually add value to any service that I'm currently providing in my team? Not really, if we're honest. But still, it's still valuable because I can still pick that up and go and present it in a conference and kind of like showcase the really cool stuff that we are doing internally in the team. Stuff that align more could be, for example, have recently been working a lot in with phishing, but just setting up evil jinx and automate it, and not only that, but add to it so that we get like notifications on our team's channel that some account was like hacked, and we got the password and session cookie and all that stuff. But not only that, but we then started, because we were implementing that and seeing like, oh, we can bypass MFA and all these stuff, like how do we fix this? And then we go into this rabbit hole of implementing, actually doing an actual implementation using one of the JavaScript frameworks of WebAuthn protocol, and actually deploying that with open source tools and having like an actual demo I can show our clients and actually add value. And all of this stuff is uh, yeah, it's just stuff that you do with the research time, but this is more of an example of something that aligns more perfectly, research that aligns more perfectly with what the clients needs, because all clients will have like a login page. They might use some single sign-on, most popular from Microsoft, Times 365, for example, Outlook stuff. In that case, there's a whole bunch of configurations, and because we're already thinking about that and trying to fix that problem, you jump into really understanding all the configurations that you can set up on M365 in order to try to fix it or to mitigate, at least reduce the risk of that happening. So yeah, there is value. You always try to align them, because if you can align the research with what you need as a company, then that's golden. But even if you can't, uh, all I ask is for it to be really, really cool stuff. So, but when people develop themselves and uh, you get that pride moment, oh my God, I'm doing like something really cool that very few people are doing, or even nobody is doing. And you kind of do that type of stuff, it kind of speaks for itself. And then it kind of shows off like in the presentations and conferences and all that stuff. Might be blogs, might be any content producing stuff, material. You kind of start like building up an image, which is always the goal, which is like what I call good marketing. Because if you're a hacker and you've have had to like search for a company to work for, you kind of know the tricks, which is usually what content are these guys producing? But, oh no, we're always like too busy, so we don't write any blogs. Like, yeah, that's thank you very much. But yeah, and when you build that type of environment, like hackers will kind of like gravitate to the orbit of the company. Like, oh yeah, we want to work with those guys because they seem to be doing like really cool stuff. So yeah, and all good things come from it. Like people are happy, like we're eating lots of pizza, and yeah, there's only good stuff from that. So
Very
very
cool.
cool.
So you do offensive security primarily. Do you do? I guess you do, of course, penetration testing, but do you also do what you would classify as red teaming, like full-on red team exercises?
Yes, we do. Um, and yeah, a lot of the work is, I mean, just educating customers, clients, like into understanding the difference between both. Because yeah, the way I would put it is, pen test is mostly you testing the technical security controls. And that you're basically testing technology. So if you have a website, is it properly configured? Most of the stuff are configuration issues. Does it have a misconfiguration that needs proper configuration to be fixed? Does it have like some sort of flaw, vulnerability that you need to patch? Those tend to be like very black and white. And the whereas the red team, what you're actually doing, if you oversimplify it, is you're testing the blue team, how good the blue team is. So it serves as some sort of exam, if you will, for them. And you can tell that in the structure of the report as well. Like if you think about a pen test, it's mostly like it's basically a glorified list of vulnerabilities, if you will. You'll put on executive summary, and every company will put it on their cover, and this is the best report in the world, all that. But at the end of the day, it's a list of vulnerabilities. Whereas a red team is, you can tell like the structure is a bit different. It will be more like a timeline of events, uh, with the specific like TTPs matched with a time window, which the blue team can trace to logs. Now they have that gives them a lot of work, because with the timestamps, they will be able to go check if are there any logs being generated because of the event that the red team caused. If there are, oh, so when I see event log 1, 3, and 5, I know he's doing like process migration on something. So they learn from that, but also they can realize, oh, wait, like there were no logs at that time of anything. So how can I generate these in the first place? And then they start thinking, having those discussions. So the blue team will always learn from that experience. And then we also like I would also like include purple team. And the way I make the distinction is basically think of it as everyone has gone to school of some sort, and think of purple teaming as like you studying for an exam. So you have like the exam and the answers, and you kind of like can look at it and replicate that and repeat the questions and do similar questions while looking at the answer. That is usually like the learning process, but then you still need the exam, the red team, in order to actually check if you learned anything, actually anything. So yeah, the purple team will usually combine like you sitting down, the blue team sitting down with the red team, but it forces you to understand like, oh, like in a red team, you could just deploy something like, I don't know, responder, for example. But in a purple team, you kind of have to know like, oh, it's uh, like or LLMNR protocol that is being broadcasted, blah blah, or like DNS and whatever. You kind of need to understand that in order to be able to explain it for the blue team, so they can go check the logs of what could be generated by you launching a tool like Responder, and then discuss like possible mitigations and how to stop it, blah blah. So it forces you to understand a bit more about it, as opposed to just throwing like Responder would be the easier tool, but there are like more complex stuff for sure. But still, like in order to for you to do the purple team, you kind of need to understand like the defensive part as well. But yeah, that's pretty much like how I see it. Bottom line, and full disclaimer, like there will be people who will disagree with your definitions of red teams and purple team. Just make sure it's simple enough that you can explain it to people who are not very technical. So again, the way I put it is pentest is a test on technology, red team is a test on your blue team, purple team is you studying, preparing yourself. You usually want to do that 2, 3 sessions before doing an actual red team. And then you do the red team, which is the exam, like to test the blue team if you actually know something. And then a lot of the job is also educational, where clients will often come in with a lot of insecurities and will be just like, no, no, like I'm scared of you like testing me on a red team and then like exposing myself. Like, no, that's the point. Like that's how you learn. The way I will judge you is by comparing 2 red teams and seeing if you improved or you did not improve. That's how you see it. Same with pen tests. You will see like a typical graph. There used to be like we found 10 critical findings in the first one. Now there's 0. We found the 10 highs. Now there's only 2. That's improvement. That's how you go about it. And a lot of the work is just educational to try and explain that to clients and make them feel as safe as possible throughout the whole process and not make them look bad in front of their bosses or whoever that may be. So yeah.
Hmm. So I guess you need to be a lot more mature to benefit from both the red and purple team services, I guess. But I guess it might be self-explanatory, but who do you think, what should be the criteria for being ready for a red team, and not just like money better spent getting a pen test or even just a vulnerability scan?
Yeah. So in order to do like the way I like to explain like the pyramid, if you will, of needs. So usually you will start like in terms of like third party service procurement in a company, in any typical customer. You will often like the CISO will come in, the first step, probably hire CISO, chief security officer, whatever, and then they will do like a whole bunch of stuff, calculate risks, see the most likely tech vectors and all that, so calculate costs, assign budget, blah, blah, all that stuff. But then when they actually try to hire some external third-party service, the first thing they would probably look into is probably something like architecture review, where they have like this design. So I got my external network, DMZ, internal network, cloud. How does it integrate? Where does it connect into through the DMZ or not? Blah blah. Do I have like firewalls in between all those areas to segregate all whatever, or is it like a no trust type of thing? But bottom line is like you want some sort of architecture review from people who have done it like in other companies, usually consultancies are a good fit. But then when you're kind of like feeling good about that design, you then want to do like configuration reviews on each of those security controls because what's the point of having a firewall if it's allowing everything to come in? So that's pretty much it. And your cloud configuration, blah, blah, see like if it's properly done and all that. So you have like a whole bunch of configuration reviews. After you do all that, and then you started feeling really good, then you want to do like a pen test. Again, if you have technology, you want to test it. There's most likely a ton of misconfigurations, all that stuff like out of end of life like software that you need like to update, that type of stuff. You'll detect all of that with good decent pen tests. But then at some point like you start realizing that, oh, I don't just have like one person who is like a sysadmin but kind of like configures the firewall on the side. It's actually a team. Like either this person has a full-on job just to do that, or it's two or three of them, or it's them having also a SOC team. At that point, you want to see you like you can't practice for 100-meter sprint if you don't have a timer. That's like the timer is part of it. Like you can't just say, "Oh no, I'm just going to run and then go to the Olympic Games or something." No, you have to have the timer. It's the same thing. You're measuring yourself. What's the point of having a blue team if you have no metric whatsoever that tells you we were this good and now we're improving? That's how we do everything in every other business area. And the blue team has to have that as well. And how do you do that? Through a red team. So that's when you know that you should be doing a red team is, do you have a team of people whose sole responsibility are we that big that we now have a team of people, even if it's small or even if it's external SOC team? Like, how do I know if that's external SOC team in whatever other country that I just hired and I'm paying X amount of krona or dollars like a month? How do I know if they're doing their job? Like, that's what you do in a red team. So yeah, that's usually how I would go about it to try to understand if you need one or not.
Very interesting. So onto a bit of a different topic within offensive security, just the amount of different courses, certifications, boot camps, it's just exploded over the years. So what are your thoughts on certifications within this field and how one should navigate the landscape, I guess?
Oh, so usually there's like a huge debate. People who are very pro and people who are very against. But to be honest with you, I am on the pro certification side. And I don't know, where do I start? I think for starters, like it's good to clarify the definition. So, not the definition of certifications per se, but it's like there are a huge range of certifications. There's your CEH, your Security Plus, which I would consider very basic, and it's usually, I want to say, multiple options, multiple choice type of exams. I might be wrong with one of them, but not sure. But point being, it's like very easy. And then there's like, I don't know, offensive security stuff where not so much OSCP, which is not that easy, but then you'll have like at the second level, I think OSWE, OSEP, and OSED. That's web offensive security, the OS, and then W is web expert, I want to say, web application expert. Then you have the EP, which is expert pen tester, I want to say. And then the ED, which I have, is exploit. Is it? Um, exploit
Exploit developer or
developer, I think. Yeah. And yeah, there's a huge difference like in doing those. But usually the people who are against it, what they say is that they are it's a bad way for you to measure how good a hacker is. Now, the thing is, like, what am I looking for? Like, there are two people. There's two groups of testing how good a hacker is that I'm interested in. One is interesting, uh, wanting to measure people how good a hacker is from people that I'm interviewing, and then it's like measuring myself because again, metrics, and I want to improve myself, so I will do certifications type of thing. But in the interview process, it's not like I want. It's not a bad thing. Like if you have certifications, it shows me that you are dedicated, that you really put some effort into this. Because again, there are certifications like even, and to be honest, like even like the most basic ones like CH and Security Plus. If you're doing those, uh, usually I will not criticize like someone who came fresh out of college, like for not having, which turns out to be like a very expensive sometimes a certification. So the most advanced ones. So I kind of like, yeah, if you do the cheaper ones and you show me that at least you studied a little bit and you took the time to go to the exam, that's definitely a plus. So that will always reflect good on you. And the more advanced ones are amazing to measure myself, like to force myself into learning new stuff. Um, so I kind of like it, and I don't like thinking of it as measuring hackers so much, but I like to think of certifications as driver's license. It's not like if you have a driver's license, it doesn't mean you're one of the best drivers in the world. No, that's not the point. That was never the point. Oh, let me compare myself to my friend, like who had I don't know the quickest, who took the least time to have his driver's license. That's not how it works. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to make roads safer, to make sure that you at least reach a very low level that you can drive a car safely, that you will not put people in danger. That's the point of certifications for me, in my view. It's like I'm assessing you, like at least you have this. Like if you have OS EP or OSWE, I'm not going to ask you like what's a SQL injection. Like I already know. And again, big difference here. These exams, the trusting ones, are will be proctored these days. So again, big question mark there. If people did it before, then you can argue. Let me ask the questions just to make sure. But yeah, if you're coming in with OSWE or OSEP, OSED, there's a lot of basic stuff that I'm not asking you, and I will just assume that you know, because I'm pretty sure you do know. Uh, Being someone who have gone through doing a lot of these certifications, I kind of know like that no matter how smart you think you are, you're going to break a sweat doing like OSEP or SWE or SED. You're going to sweat. Like you're going to get stressed. You're going to find yourself like in the midst of battle, if you will. Like I know like you suffered. And that's the part that I respect. Like, hey, even if I know like that wasn't the best material ever, but hey, I know you've gone through it, and that part I respect. So that's why like I still really like certifications, and yeah, I try to go through one every now and then just to push myself and kind of like lead by example. That has a big impact on the team as well. And of course, I try to have my team always do those because at the end of the day, it's like, again, the driver's license. It's nice to, in offers, public tenders, and all that, it's a really nice way because to put ourselves out there like yeah we have these certifications because at the end of the day I'm always like a bit skeptical about the people who are so against certifications. It's like kind of like oh, you just don't want to put in the effort to do it. It's like, because yeah, at some point, like you being in a company, like the cost part, I mean, it depends. Like Sans will put it to the extreme, like $10,000 type of stuff. So that will push it. But still, like most of these certifications, it's not you who are paying. I mean, you employed person. It's usually the company paying for those. So you could just do it. But a lot of people will be just like, no, I'll take the easier road and just criticize this thing and just say like, this is not a good way to measure hackers. It's like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to improve myself. And it's kind of like in an industry where everyone says they're amazing, and there's oh, it's so amazing. Like, every hacker is the best hacker in the world. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Not very scientific, but very interesting. So yeah, certifications ends up to be the closest to a scientific measurement that we have. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But is it better than not having any? Yes. So that's my point of view on certifications.
Definitely. I really like to see that someone has the OSCP. Just it might not be fully transferable to real life. It might be easy in some parts, but it shows some grit. It
Yes.
shows the ability to both try harder, trademark, but
Yes.
also to learn on the fly. The course material in itself is not enough, so it really shows
Yeah.
mindset and perseverance. And so
And it
I
shows
really
that I
value that
won't
from
have,
hire.
yeah.
What do
And
you say?
it shows that I won't have to explain to you what Nmap is. Like,
Yeah.
it's easier for me to accept.
And onto the topic of tooling. There's a lot of amazing free-to-use tools that are used every day by pen testers to perform their testing, and a lot of junior people come and question, do you need to know how to code to be a pen tester? Very cliche question. Some people will say, no, you don't need to, but it's beneficial and so on. So what are your thoughts on this topic? The ability to make in-house tools and yeah, who needs to be able to do that, and what's the benefit of having a pen tester that can customize or develop their own tooling?
That's a tremendous benefit because think of it this way. You can be, mind you can be an amazing hacker, an incredible professional by just using tools that are out there and being really savvy and understanding how they work. Some tools will take a lot of effort into understanding all the techniques and all that stuff. One of like the most basic examples, like most people you will talk to will assume that, oh no, SQL injection is just like that web application stuff. It's like, no, 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 I know that. That's basic. But then you put a tool like SQL Map with so many options, and you're like, do you? Wait. And a lot of them will struggle with that. So again, you can be an amazing hacker by just using tools that are out there, SQL maps of the world and all those stuff. Um, but inevitably, there will be, if you really do a deep dive, you will always hit a point where you will be criticizing the tool, which at that point will be the best tool because it does this, this, and that, and it's the only one that does that. And you will be at a stage where you need to extend the functionality of that tool. Now, that could uh, reveal itself like in many ways. Like that's why like good tools will have always the ability for you to develop like extensions. Like you can write burp extensions. You can write I forget the I want to say temper script. I could be wrong, but for SQL map, you can write like Python extensions. I think it's temper script. Could be wrong, but yeah, you can always extend these tools and write more functionality to add to it. Or in some situations, you'll just have to write your own because it's just easier. So yeah, this whole idea of, oh, but I'm not a programmer. Well, then become one. Like where it's just a skill. Like you had to learn at some point like how to do hacking stuff. Like the more you understand about how to develop the code, uh, and in the end, it's really not that hard when you think of it. Like if you need to, at this point, like if I need to learn like a new language, it's like how do you do a print line? How do you do, oh, in C++ it's called cout, and then you do like less than. It's like, okay, that's what you're learning, like the syntax. So adapting like to different languages is like, how do you do a condition, if else? How do you do a switch? How do you do like a loop? Do while do, whatever, for loop, and so on. Like you're just learning syntax. How do you define a function? How do you do like OOP, object-oriented programming, and all that to be able to organize my code? Because I have written horrible code where I was doing like rootkit development stuff. So I had to write like the user mode part where I would write down the driver, the vulnerable driver, and then I would hack it basically, and some buffer overflow or whatever. Usually write what where vulnerability, and then exploit it, and then load like my rootkit. And I wrote that. And the initial version works. It worked, but I looked at that code and I felt shame. I was like, there is no chance in hell I would ever show this code to anyone. There's not a chance. So, and again, going back to the expert thing where you kind of have to be updating yourself. And if you don't, you forget stuff. Is like, when was the last time at that point, like a couple of years ago, when I had written like classes, not only classes because that's basic, but like with child derived classes, and then oh, what inherited classes, like all these stuff, how the virtual method, what, how does it work really? And I didn't remember that at that point. And I went back home and I read for a couple of days a really old C++ book that I had from college. I reviewed the whole thing. It came back to my mind, and I wrote that whole thing up. And then I was like really proud of that code. Now it was just like beautiful. I was like, "Ah, it felt really good." But yeah, that's like you have to know how to write code. And even like new languages like Rust, for example. Uh, if I sit down with a C developer, with a C++ developer, I can comment on the code and say like, oh, so this is a vulnerability, and this is why, and this is why, and this is why, and explain all that, and run through the code and be able to analyze the code. But if I realized some time ago that if I didn't learn something more modern, like and memory safe, like Rust, first of all, I wouldn't be able to justify why is it memory safe to a client, to a customer, to a programmer, a developer in that team. And then, uh, yeah, just understanding that dynamics, explaining to them why does the borrow checker, how does the borrow checker work? How does the lifetime feature work? Async, all those stuff. If you don't understand that, you won't be able to explain and read code and analyze and say, okay, so this is not going to work, or this is bad because this and that. And in having that, part of having those conversations is you studying on the background and really programming in these new languages, even let alone like the older ones. So yeah, the whole idea of you not having to be a programmer, again, you can be an amazing hacker, but you will always, and this is not to compare uh, this hacker with other hackers. It's like you're limiting yourself. You will hit a ceiling and you will not be able to break out of it because you are not allowing yourself to learn this next thing, which is programming, and allow yourself to develop in that sense. And when you learn to do that, tools will come easily. You will be able to develop your own stuff and develop new stuff, adapt older stuff into newer stuff. It just breaks so many ceilings that you should just learn the program. Point blank. That's it.
Nice recommendation there. Yeah, because if there are two topics that I really like associate with you, because you've had talks at B-sides about both of them. First one is rootkits, and the other one is automation for offensive security. So I'd love to know your thoughts about using like basically all development these days happens in CI/CD pipelines and so on. So how do you use these development concepts for your offensive development? And also, has anything changed with the advent of AI in relation to this?
Um, well, so first question, how do I use it? I'm going to oversimplify here, just not to go for hours on this, but um, let's say, like, for example, you have I'm going to run a red team tomorrow, and I need to set up like the infrastructure that I need in order to do the thing. I need like a, let's say, a C2, like whatever, Metasploit. And I need like an interpreter so that's executable so that I can double click that thing when I get initial access, and then it reaches out to my C2. Now, if you just make it as basic as that, one, there's the EDR bypass component. I'm not even going to talk about that, but let's talk about just communication to the C2. So if you just have like one server, what ends up happening is it becomes extremely easy for the blue team to block that communication. It just sees, oh, okay, there's weird communication going to the C2 that the signature says it's like interpreter on HTTPS or whatever. Let's just block that. And you can just go to the firewall and block the port to IP whatever, where your C2 is. Now, the problem is you want to make it as hard as possible for the blue team to stop your attack. So what that actually means is, instead of just having the C2 server, I will have like, I don't know, 10 proxy servers in front of it, and the actual C2 will be hidden behind those proxy servers. And there will be a list of those 10 proxy servers embedded inside my payload executable. So when it actually tries to reach out to communicate with the C2, it tries to, for the proxy number one, and if you block proxy number one, it tries proxy number two. If you block two, I tried three, and so on. Now, the problem is, and I'm not even talking about the extra infrastructure like phishing and all that stuff. It's like just setting up the C2 and the 10 servers, proxy servers that I just mentioned, is just like a lot of copy pasting. That's just the code part where like I'm copy pasting like the configuration from, I don't know, Nginx or Apache or something, like for all the proxies, proxy servers, and then like setting up like the C2, just turning those up like in AWS. Like it's a lot of copy pasting, a lot of clicking and stuff. It's just the most boring stuff ever. No matter how much I love this stuff, like that's just boring, man. Tedious job. So obviously you want to automate that. Um, and that's why you get into automation, is just understanding like Terraform, which is the standard, I want to say, as well as mix it up with Ansible in order to deploy software internally to the servers once they're up, and just figuring out that whole thing. And after Terraform, and then I will have like, and that was the part of the presentation, I will have like a Python wrapper to all of that, to the Terraform, to run the Terraform commands and all that, because I then want to extract output from the Terraform, which is give me all the IP addresses, the public IP addresses of all the proxies that you just generated. That's output that I can only have after running the Terraform script. And once you get that, the Python will then run code to deploy the GitHub Actions, the CI/CD pipeline, or the CD pipeline. And given this input, which is all the IP addresses, generate payload.exe, which would be in this case very simplistically like an interpreter or something. But of course, can be just interpreter. It has to be like C sharp. In my case, like a C sharp wrapper that will, because you have to launch like the payload for each of the IPs, blah, blah. It gets very tricky, but you can see like that would be so much work if you're only doing one time. If tomorrow they show up, my manager shows up and, oh, you have a second red team. Oh my God, I can't handle this anymore. So obviously you have to automate that in some way. And yeah, that's where the automation really came into the front line. And I don't remember them right now because I never got deep into them, but I did. They are in the slides in the presentation. I did, but there are alternatives to Terraform. I just never got deep into them, but I know at some point there were some question marks about Terraform. If it would keep me free or open source or something, I don't remember. So maybe you might have to use the alternatives, but yeah, there's a lot of room there for improvement. But as you might imagine, like there's only 24 hours in a day, unfortunately. So at some point you have to call it quits. Not quits on the automation part, but it's like I can't go every rabbit hole in the world. So yeah, you do one thing at a time.
So, have you been using AI at all, or machine learning in your offensive operations in your work, or even your research, since this has been a very growing topic and it's becoming a large part of our lives now?
Um, Not to the extent that it was overhyped in the beginning. Like you would expect, like I'm doing something crazy with AI. At the end of the day, like AI just made me a lot faster and a lot more productive. Um, because yeah, there's a whole bunch of, let's say, mundane tasks that you will just delegate to AI and it will just pop out like really nice answer, very professional. And then you just copy paste that and there you go. That's something that would easily take you an hour to write or something, and then or more. And then all of a sudden it takes actually like 10 or 15 minutes because you're basically just reviewing the output and reading through it just to make sure it makes sense and probably fixing a couple of things here or there. But that type of work is always a lot faster than actually writing from scratch. Um, so yeah. And also like the presentation slides, that type of thing where you before you would like copy paste images and try to make sure they didn't have any watermarks, anything like from the internet. Like these days, you just ask like ChatGPT like to generate you an image. Yeah, I had a slide on something about Red Team where it was the question was, can't we automate this whole thing? And of course, the answer is no. But the I asked it like to generate a robot crying, and it made like the most beautiful image, and it was like even crying like black because of its oil. It was like very good detail. So yeah, that's just not a concern at this point. Like, oh my god, am I copying like an image from someone? I mean, there's the ethical side of AI, but I'm not gonna get into that. But yeah, it just made me so much faster, and faster in a good sense because it's really hard like to make AI do what I consider like the most fun stuff, which is the research and figuring out new things. But the stuff that is repetitive and that we're always like putting out there or whatever, paragraph here or there, or even a polite response to an email kind of type of thing, like, oh my God, like that saves you so much time. And just like having coming in early in the morning and asking like Copilot, like, do I have like any unanswered questions on my teams type of stuff? And just gives you like a really nice list of stuff. And you're like, oh my God, I had completely forgotten about that thing. And then, yeah, like you can act on it. It's like those things that just really make me look a lot more organized than I am. I'm very organized to be fair, but still like it's another level, that's for sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, other than that, not the yeah, not anything revolutionary. So, person.
Yeah, there's just so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt around AI is taking over. AI hackers are using AI for polymorphic shellcode. I haven't seen it yet. I've heard
Yeah,
about a bunch of baloney on LinkedIn, or but yeah, I haven't seen too much of it yet. So, well, but we'll see. It might come.
I think like the best meme I've seen. It was I don't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of AI cannot replace us because in order to replace us, like the clients would have to be 100% accurate on what they want. Like,
Every consultant knows.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
We've touched on research a bunch of times through this episode, but how do you feel the research capabilities are in Norway, and how do they compare to other countries? And are you part of any research communities for security research?
Uh, Not communities. It's something quite frankly, I find it like so unlikely to find, uh, not unlikely to find people like, I don't know, who will understand hypervisors. It's just like people who will go to the level I'm at. It's like very rare. And not only that, but like how likely it is for my next door neighbor to be like searching, like studying hypervisors. It's like not gonna happen. And those people will have their lives and they will be like on the other side of the world or like in way remote areas and they're just doing their thing. So you will know them and I can reach out to them, but usually it has to be like very close-ended questions just to make sure they reply. They can reply quickly because I feel that myself. Like on LinkedIn, sometimes I try to help as many people as I can, but sometimes people will just ask like open-ended questions. It's just like, dude, I don't have like an hour to answer you right now. Whereas if you ask me like a very specific question, like, what's better, OSCP or CH? That's easy. I can answer. So yeah, I can reply like really quick. But yeah, it's a little bit different in Norway. I would say that the security awareness thingy, because you can tell like, for example, having lived in Australia, you can tell like Australia has an interesting relationship with UK, where it's like little brother, older brother type of thing, where if and I'm talking about cybersecurity, probably other aspects, but I'm talking specifically about cybersecurity. If there's like red team now is trendy in the UK, like 5 years later, maybe 10, then it will become like a thing. Like in Australia, they will pick up on it and they will start doing it. And I don't know if like Norway has like a little brother, big brother relationship with anyone, but you can tell like at the end of the day, like it's a very small country. And more importantly, it's a very trusting society. So, and I'm not criticizing at all. At the end of the day, I think the best compliment I can pay this country is that's where I decided to raise my little girl. So, uh, and that's one of the reasons because uh, I feel very safe here and for my family. And I love the feeling of I can just drop my bag like in a corner and then I go home and I take a shower and I come back and it's still there. Probably exaggerating, depends on where you are exactly, but still, like you get that vibe a lot. We've had people call us because we dropped something like a boot for my daughter, like on our way back home, because they all have like little tags with phone numbers so people can call, and we just, oh yeah, can we meet here? And they just did that, which never happened anywhere else in the world. That's a good thing, but the bad thing about it is just the security mindset is usually, why would anyone attack us? So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to criticize that. It's just that in that mindset, what typically happens is just you tend to neglect security and not prioritize security so much. So, pentest, do we really need that? Why would someone hack us? Like, I have nothing to hide, type of thing. And so, yeah, it's a lot of educational work that comes with the job, which is just alerting the clients. So this is really bad. Like we've had discussions with clients from the energy sector where they were wondering, like it was, I think, in the beginning of the war, Russia, Ukraine, and they were wondering, like, oh, but why would the Russians attack us? It's just like, and the answer was very uh, geopolitical. It's like if Russia wants Europe to buy more gas from them, all they have to do is attack the other providers, such as Norway. And it's not like Norway did anything wrong, but they're being attacked just to serve their purposes so Europe can buy more gas from Russia. So a lot of the times people think like, oh, you have to be aggressive in order to be in a fight. It's like, no, sometimes you're just minding your own business. It's people will just come at you, especially in the cyber world. It's like the internet is like the Wild West type of thing. Like people don't realize there's constant attacks happening at all times. Everything is scanned. Like the people who get surprised that, oh my God, we're getting scanned, so you didn't know, and it's just the nature of it. So yeah, that's the disadvantage, the negative side of being so trusting as a society. That usually, yeah, why bother with security? So these types of things will not tend to develop as much. Not that there is unwillingness from the research community, but if there isn't money flooding in somehow, usually through services and this type of thing, it's hard to do really good work only on researchers' spare time, as opposed to, oh, I actually have to do this because big company X is paying X amount of money and I have to do it. Now it motivates a whole bunch of people, and it not only motivates, but actually gives you like, oh, so now I have 8 hours a day for my job time to focus on this, as opposed to I'm going back home, I'm super tired, but because I really love this cybersecurity stuff, I'm going to do some research like for 1 hour, maybe two. That's 1 hour too, compared against to 8 hours. And that's where the awareness and paying money comes in to play. So it's good like to have educate the big clients regarding that. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think we still have some maturing to do in Norway, as you say, with the UK Australia connection. We are also a bit behind the rest, I think, but I hope that we will grow more there because the threats are real and they're becoming more and more relevant every day. So,
exactly. 'Cause, yeah, just in like the difference of mentality, being so trusting as a society, it's like if you compare it like to some country that is in the opposite aisle, like let's say Israel, and not getting political about the war and all that. It's just it's a fact that because they are so paranoid that they are like fighting the whole Middle East around them, there is no denying the fact that like Mossad is incredibly developed, like in terms of cyber capabilities. Like they will be, of course, very good because they're always paranoid, as opposed to in another place where you might be just, oh, why would someone attack me? Like you will not develop all that capability. And if you see like the cyber industry there is like ultra developed, like there's money, tons of money flooding in, which justifies all this investment and all that. So at the end of the day, like they are the ones doing the Stuxnets of the world and that type of really advanced stuff. And I'm sure there's new stuff that we're not aware of, but yeah, just the difference in mentality makes like a big difference in terms of actual results and capabilities that you develop as a country. So
hmm. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on,
there
Andre.
you go. Thank you for having me. I
So,
hope I didn't bore you too much.
no, it was, thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine. Where can people find you?
Uh, they can find me on, I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. So yeah, André Lima, Norway, and LinkedIn should be the only one, I think. But yeah, there's also Twitter, X, 0x4NDR3, basically Andre in lead, with the hexadecimal part. But yeah, those two, I'll definitely answer, unless you ask me very open-ended questions. But yeah, I'm always trying to help people, especially like beginners in the industry, entry level hackers, trying to figure out how to get into the industry and how to learn something or how to do something related to one of my presentations. Sometimes I'll have questions about those. And yeah, I will always answer. So if I don't, just keep in mind that I am a father and I take great pride in spending a lot of time with my daughter. So maybe I just am busy. So, but I will definitely answer. So,
And I really encourage everyone who are interested in either rootkits or automation, security automation, and stuff like that to check out the B-sides Oslo recordings that are out on YouTube of your talks. They're really always the talk that I look most forward to when I go to B-sides. That's
thank
just a
you.
fact.
Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for coming, and
Thank you.
see you later.
Take care.